Hello and welcome to today's Lemongrass Live. My name is Jo Derry-Bennett from the Lemongrass marketing team. I'd also like to welcome our discussion leaders today from Lemongrass. We have Tim, Kiran and Praveen. Just before we get into the full discussion, I just want to give a little bit of admin overview for those that haven't joined Lemongrass Live before. It's designed to be an informative but informal chat. We really want it to be engaging as well. So on your screen, you have a chat stroke questions panel. Feel free to type in a question at any time. We'll try and fit in as many as we can in the next 28 minutes or so. Any that we can't cover, we'll follow up directly via email after the session. So with that, I'll hand over to Tim. Thanks ever so much.
Hey, thanks, Jo. Hi, everybody. This is Tim Wintrip. I am the Chief Customer and Sales Officer at Lemongrass, and thanks for joining this this short chat, basically. So today we're going to be talking about S4 and the easiest path to get there, amongst other things. So we've obviously we are exclusively focused on SAP in the cloud, as some of you may know, and we have quite a few customers that we've migrated to cloud or we manage on the cloud, and many of them are going through this dilemma, this conundrum on S4. As a data point, we surveyed a bunch of our customers, and about 60 to 70% of them do not see a compelling business event to move to S4, whereas something they feel that's being driven largely by SAP at the moment. So this poses a question: how can, if they have to get to S4, how can they get there as quickly, as efficiently, and with in some instances as little disruption as possible? Now, we do have other clients that are much more engaging and looking at driving a transformation around S4. We're going to touch on that a little bit, but we're primarily going to be covering off. We'll probably cover off kind of what we like to call the minimum viable migration or minimum viable approach to getting there. So with further ado, I'll hand over to Praveen, who's perhaps going to talk about a couple of specific use cases, and we'll dive into the discussion.
Sure. Thank you, Tim. This is Praveen Gadora. I'm the Senior Vice President, Practice Lead for SAP on Cloud. So today the session is about the minimum viable approach to an S4 migration or an upgrade, if you want to call it. But what we see there out there from the customers are two different type of customers. One being strategic, so they have actually bought into the SAP S4 HANA story, and they feel that this is critical to their operations. So these customers, what we are seeing out there, are basically looking at their existing ECC deployment and looking at how they can now move into S4 HANA with all the new business processes transformation, and how they can consolidate all their ECC landscape into a central or SAP S4 HANA instance. So this is one kind of customer. The other one, I call it more as a tactical adopter. So they do see a potential in a SAP S4 HANA, but they also feel that they don't see a near-term, basically a near-term benefit of moving into S4, but they need to get into S4. Of course, for supportability, the 2027 date, and we'll talk a little bit about that, but they will need to get there. So for these customers, we are talking about what is the easiest and the cheapest way of getting into SAP S4, and today's talk is more about the tactical adapters. But before we get there, for the strategic customers who are looking at greenfield, they still have to come up with an approach. So with that, Kiran, what do you see with the greenfield implementations? What is the approach that the customers are taking? So,
thanks, Praveen. Hi all, my name is Kiran Musnuru. I'm part of the solution architecture team at Lemongrass. To answer Praveen's question, right, it is not a greenfield or a migration. So there are two parts of it. One is the S4 transformation, the other is the cloud transformation. Mostly what is happening is any customer who is looking for the S4 transformation, 99% of the customers are looking for a cloud. So for the cloud transformation, that's what we are talking about, is how do you take care of the DevSecOps model from the SAP point of view, whether you do it both together or later. So that is where each customer is different. So the key point is we need to make sure that the cloud operating model is set. And again, there are multiple ways of doing it. Either you can bundle it together, the S4 as well as the cloud, but our approach or what we are seeing is different. So in the CloudSec approach, what we cover is like deployment, automation of used for the deployment of the S4 machines, like a greenfield, right? We still need to deploy the machines, and what is the efficient way of doing it? And then how do you use the automation toolings and all that? That's one piece to it. The second piece is the operations itself. Now, in a monolithic application, this is how we do it. But once you move to the cloud, and it is far different compared to what it is. So that instead of doing both in one shot, we can enhance it or get the cloud model going and then start thinking about it. Of course, this call is more about the S4. I can go on and on the cloud ways of doing it and cloud optimizations. But in the interest of the topic, again, back to you, Praveen. What is that from the customer point of view? What is the first thing which they are looking for their S4 transformation journey?
Yeah, so for the S4 transformation journey, and more talking about the minimal viable approach, essentially there are two approaches you can take. One is a single step where you're going in from your existing environment directly into S4 HANA brownfield. And then the second approach is two-step approach. The two-step approach is where you go as is into a digital transformation journey. So essentially you go into cloud as is, and then you utilize all the automations and all the tools that are available in cloud, the flexibility of the cloud to spin up and spin down the environments to go into S4 implementation. In the first case, where you're taking a single step, there you will have to get a bigger business buy-in, right? Because it's a major change for them. However, if you're taking a two-step, then the first business case that you build is around what are the benefits you're going to get after transforming into cloud, which is essentially efficiency, flexibility, and maybe cost savings. You know, those are the business cases that you can build around the two-step approach. And also, once you take the two-step approach, you have this tremendous set of tools, so that tremendous amount of automation that you can build, so that you can create a parallel environment for your S4 deployment where you're not affecting your production landscape, and you can go on that journey in parallel, right? So we definitely recommend a two-step approach where you first take your environment as is, and then you work on your S4 HANA transformation in the cloud. What gives you tremendous benefits is least, I would say, least intrusive, and you know, it gives you enough time to build your business case for the transformation. But in order to do this, you know, we have to have good solutions for our customers. We have to have good approach for our customers. So Tim, from this perspective, what are the things we are doing to help the customer in going for the two-step approach, if you will?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a few things here, right? So, you know, one, most of our customers have not got a business case sorted out for S4, right? So yeah, the first thing is building out this business case, which, you know, it needs to look at, you know, all the kind of classic things. You know, what does that new operating model look like? You know, how much is it going to cost? What's the transformation lift? And of course, you know, ultimately a business impact assessment of, you know, what things need to change. And we'll come back to that in a second in terms of sort of must-do functional areas. But first of all, you know, that's a step that, you know, needs to be really thought through and executed upon. So we're seeing a number of customers, you know, that we're currently kind of working with in this sense to help build that business case out. You know, and I guess a difference, and it does tend to be kind of what we're seeing is a couple of customers working on where, you know, perhaps, you know, not to throw anyone under a bus, large scale GSIs are coming in with like a busload of consultants, right, that they want to sort of sell potentially multi multi-year business blueprinting phase almost, right? What we kind of pivot to is much more kind of an agile methodology. You know, we're all about cloud, and I guess some of that agile thought process as kind of part of our core. So one of the things we would suggest is a rapid sort of set of business case assessment exercises, whether that's first looking at, you know, what is the cost benefit of moving to cloud quickly, and there normally is, right? Some of that can also help fund some of the effort associated with S4. So if you can save a bunch of money moving to cloud without changing too much, maybe just some level of currency upgrades, right? Making sure that, you know, you're on latest versions, and perhaps you're going to do some kind of heterogeneous move, maybe moving from, let's say, Oracle to HANA as part of that step. Get to cloud, build a business case around that, potentially save some money, which can also be recycled into any S4 journey. Now, what we're also about is a sort of a fail fast approach, which may sound bad, but it's not. It's kind of very common in the app space. What we're saying, you know, what we build is a higher amount of automation for S4. So we're seeing a couple of our customers, and we've actually built something called a labs offering, right? But, you know, we call it what it is. It's a very automated S4 deployment, and we're seeing customers wanting to try see what S4 looks like in practicality. So, you know, basically doing an import of their data, you know, running various, you know, using kind of input from various readiness reports, looking at what some of the functional reporting looks like, and actually seeing that's something that can be done in weeks or a few months, as opposed to something that would take a long time. And, you know, again, slightly different approach to perhaps the more traditional, let's go and do a long-standing, you know, business review. This is more about, hey, why don't we take the premise that we're going to move it over to one of these rapidly available POC environments, see what works, see what breaks, and then build a remediation plan around that. But there will be a remediation plan required. Let's not kid ourselves with S4. There is you know, this isn't just a technical upgrade. There's some functional components. So I know, Praveen, we were working on one recently. What's some of the kind of functional nuggets that we're seeing out there you really have to address, right? We can't hide from them. So, you know, what are the things that are kind of front of mind for you?
Absolutely. So this all depends from customer to customer. You know, as you know, Tim, we have encountered highly complex environments with a lot of SAP bolt-ons, a lot of SAP customization. So essentially, the way we look at it is this is you know, a two-part consideration, if you will. One is a technical remediation, where you have to move now into an HANA database. For that, you need code remediation. Of course, for HANA move, you need code remediation, but essentially moving into HANA itself needs code remediation. Then you have to adapt to, you know, the data models to the S4 HANA data models, and also you need to keep into mind the Fiori interfaces and the front end that you would need for that. So this is on the technical side, not a big heavy lifting, but still there. On the functional side, we are talking about mapping your existing business processes into S4HANA business processes. And then for the leftovers, you have to look at what is your best or the least you know, the least painful path to get there. So some of the must-dos, I would say, that at least we see out there, Tim, when we're doing this brownfield S4 HANA migration, is essentially around business partners. So earlier, you know, we all know that prior to S4 HANA, we had a single entity that could be a customer and a vendor, right? And we had two separate entries. Now it becomes a single entry. So that's your business partner management. You have to work around it. You have to also look at cleaning up your master data, if you will. Some of the other things you might want to look at is your material ledger, and you know, a few other things. But certainly what we have seen is, if you take into account 3, 4, or maybe 5 of these functional aspects, and see how you can map it into the new S4 HANA, you know, your path for going at least into S4 HANA becomes easier. And then later on, you can look at enhancements and the actual business process transformation, but it gets you over the hump. But also with this transformation, also comes that people want to utilize now the cloud capabilities and all the data analytics around SAP data and non-SAP data. So that is where Kiran is of great help from our side. So Kiran, maybe you want to quickly talk about what are the different the data analytics piece that the customers can utilize once they do this transformation.
Sure. So the key thing is the cloud native capabilities. So cloud is providing the extra capabilities where you don't have these capabilities in the on-premise. So for example, the data analytics is one piece. There are other pieces like integrations and all that. So I'll come one at a time. So first part is the data analytics, right? So traditionally, the data analytics, SAP is one gigantic cron-driven monolithic application. What's happening is we used to use the BWs and all that for that. Now SAP has become one source. There are many other applications, cloud applications, which are coming into the picture. And now, how do you act on that? Like more of a silos. Everything is a silos instead of that, right? So basically, each and every customer is looking how do you integrate all these various silos together and derive some insights. And in that comes the enterprise data warehouse / modern data warehouse. With the cloud, right, there are capabilities which are providing an elastic model. So previously, when you want a BW, you need to have an infrastructure. So you need to have a HANA, and then you need to have a licensing, and all those details are there. So whereas with the modern data warehousing, it's a serverless. You don't need to have people doing administration stuff. And then more of pay as you go model. If you use queries, then you are paying. Those type of scenarios is what it's bringing to the table, and that is where the cloud agnostic, or basically the cloud capabilities, which we can take use those as part of it. So that is one piece, which is the data and analytics piece. The second is the integration story. So the integration story is the whole API management, right? SAP is one source. Now, how do you use to move the data to the non-SAP sources? That's where this whole API management, previously we used PI and PO and all that, whereas the other capabilities which the hyperscalers are providing, like the logic apps type scenarios, the no code, the power platforms, and all this, these are the additional capabilities which are helping the S4 customers or the integration tightly integrated with that. So with that, right, so what do we need to do all this? Obviously, we need to have a strategy, because what is that? Our strategy is for a long term, and the whole cloud native capabilities, how do you make it more of a cloud application compared to the SAP is more of a traditional monolithic. So these are all the things which we need to take into consideration as part of it. And that's where, Praveen, back to you, is how do you see that happening in that area?
So I think you touched base on most of the things there, and one of the key reasons SAP is offering their platform, the BTP platform. But as you rightly mentioned, in an S4 environment, the whole idea is to take your customizations out of S4 into your external applications. You could use BTP platforms, you could use cloud native platforms, or you could build your own Python and JavaScript, believe it or not, and create those integrations. So we see all different kind of mixes here. In terms of how customers are approaching, they're all very viable, easily manageable, and all this can be worked out when we go through the SAP S/4HANA readiness check. These things are spit out as to what are the things that we need to work on in terms of interfaces, where you need upgrades, what are the changes you need to make, and based on that, a right strategy can be developed. So that's, in a sense, what we're seeing out there. So,
and it's not necessarily just you do one. So a couple of things. One is obviously we've been advocating kind of moving to cloud as a step one, but that doesn't mean that's all you do. What we have seen is the folks that are spending the time to look and prepare and think about, per Praveen's comment around some of the must-do areas early, it means that it's going to take the pain out of the execution, right? As opposed to trying to rush it. One thing obviously is if we roll forward 3 or 4 years, or not 3 or 4 years, 3 or 4 years, we're going to find that, finding people to do some of this work as we get close to 2027 is going to get more and more challenging. So, one thing we're advocating is it's a two-step. It's not really two-step. It's a move to cloud. In parallel, look at some of these things that need to be prepared.
Yeah.
Of course, per Kieran and Praveen's point there, we are seeing a number of customers reflect on whether this is a good time to look at a wider digital transformation. So it's not just about S4, it's about, maybe there's parts of the digital process that might be better served, not necessarily using SAP, right? So, while you're going through this sort of change, don't forget about there are other means to skin the cat, so to speak. So that's one of the things that we've seen a number of our customers doing, and the idea of away from more proprietary, specific SAP ways to solve a business problem. You've got more choices now, basically. It's a very rich world out there. So that was one of the things, I guess, in that area that we could talk to. And I think we would urge you to look at as you go through this. So I mean, sorry.
I was going to say, Tim, I'm loving the conversation, but we've got quite a few questions that you're generating. So I wonder if we can just spend a bit of time on that. I think maybe just before I give the first question, it's a reflection. SAP is in our blood. We probably all worked in the industry more than 20 years, sadly. Don't like to date myself. So, people have put blood, sweat and tears into their SAP estates. And so my first question is completely on this line. They wrote, we've put significant investment into our ECC system and we're worried about the change impact on our business. How do we deal with the customizations they've built in and suit their business requirements already? Who wants to take that one?
I can take that. So basically there are multiple things, right? So as you rightly told, right, the business case is the key, but a lot of customers are telling, I spent like years and years on all that. So the key thing is that customization is what we need to do. Whether that customizations are too heavy. So if it is like my business process is all good, but I don't want to change anything. If that is the case, then that is where this minimum viable product would come into the picture. Whereas if the customer is telling that my business processes are pretty old, I'm doing a lot of manual steps and all that, so I need to redo the whole thing, that's a different story. And that's where the other piece of the greenfield, wherein you're improving the processes. So that is how I would answer that question, is based on your existing. If you're happy with your business process, don't need to change anything. You just maneuver with all the things which you need to do for the S4. That would be my suggestion.
Okay, thanks for that one, Kieran. Second question. So businesses are typically 24/7 now. There are very few industries that do not operate on that on that level. The question is, we are sensitive to downtime and have very limited cutover windows. What are you guys seeing, or what are you utilizing to minimize downtime?
Oh, that's Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm working with a client at the moment in exactly this sort of space. So, a couple of things. Firstly, they've decided to do the two-step approach. So, first move to cloud so that they can get onto later versions, should we say, and bank some money, but they can do that within a pretty small cutover window. There's various ways to do that. We have some approaches. There's other ways to do near zero downtime migrations and things like that. Secondly, they're looking at how they what are those must-do areas. So what are the things they need to remediate now so they can have a run-up at it. So definitely this customer's not on cloud today, so you think about the risk profile there and making sure that the business is comfortable and operating within the right windows. Doing it as two steps. One, it helps with the risk profile, and it slices the elephant into more bite-sized chunks. So the two-step thing is definitely a key message there to incorporate. And then secondly, starting now with the preparation around the move to S4 is good. So you can get the business's head around it. You can sort of fit into the appropriate change windows. Doing that, early will help reduce the impact down the line. Praveen, did I miss anything there? That makes sense?
No, I think you did cover everything. Yep. So essentially, you talked about downtime for two separate processes, if you will. In the two-step process, one is for cloud migration. You talked about how we can minimize the downtime, and we have been doing it for such a long time. But even for the S/4HANA migration, first getting into cloud, that is step one. How do we minimize on that transformation as well? So yeah, I think we are covered there.
This is related to the next question. I think, Tim, you started elaborating on this earlier. What happens if we leave it to later? And I do know a lot of companies are doing this. They're sitting on the fence. They're waiting to watch what others are doing. They're waiting to see if SAP will push the deadline out again. What's your perspectives? Who wants to take that one? The longer you leave it, what's going to happen?
You take that one, Praveen.
Sure. So what do I do if I leave it to 2025? Basically, this is our perspective. If customer is not starting now, because these projects can run for a long time, depending on how complex your environment is. If you're going in for greenfield, it might take you up to 2 years. Brownfield, the minimum viable operation can be months, right? It all depends on how complex your environment is. But essentially, what you're doing is you're just pushing the ball, and you're basically cornering yourself, and maybe bring yourself to the wire. Because remember one thing, that SAP is going to get rid of the compatibility packs by 2025. So if we reverse engineer it, we need to start something now, at least the planning phase, looking at remediation. What are the things you need to do in order to get there by 2025? And that would be our recommendation, is do it now in two-step process. At least start off with what you have now, and then get into the minimum viable approach, once you get into cloud. And so you have enough runway till 2027 to get all the things in place. Else you'll be paying premium for the SAP support after that. So
yeah,
that's
I think also potentially they're already missing out on benefits, because there's no further upgrades. There's no, you're investing in an old product at the moment. And I think in conclusion, we're trying to give people a manageable approach where they have decisions that they can make that are not enforced on them. I think you want to control costs, durations, and many, many more factors, because there is so much going on in these businesses now. So we're just running out of time. I'm going to hand back to Tim for one last summary. Are there 2 or 3 takeaways, Tim, that you want to leave us with?
So I think we've kind of said it a few times, but depending on your maturity in cloud, if it's a move to S4 and a move to cloud, that could be a lot to take on. So think about splitting it into 2 chunks to slice the elephant, as I say. Potentially, focused on the business case now. We've seen in all the customers that we work that moving to cloud will create a positive business case, which potentially could help offset some of the burden, especially if you haven't got budget for S4 now. Maybe the business case can free up money from moving to cloud to help fund some of that initial S4 work. And don't fall into the trap of, the kind of classic GSI approach where they have 2 or 3 trucks of consultants wheeling up outside to do work. There is another way. So, just be very cognizant, because that obviously is the agenda of a lot of the GSIs. That isn't our space, it's what we do, but obviously that's our opinion. But those would be our kind of absolute core messages. Start thinking about S4 now in terms of what those functional changes need to be, but it doesn't have to be a rewrite of your whole business process. I think that would be the summary from us.
Brilliant. Thank you, Tim. Thanks everyone for your time today, and thanks to everyone that raised questions or perspectives. There's 2 perspectives I didn't get a chance to share, so I'll share that with the team afterwards, just so they're aware. So thanks to Tim, Kiran and Praveen for such an engaging and hopefully thought-provoking discussion. This session has been recorded, so in the next few days, I'll share via email a link to the recording in case you'd like to refer back to it or share it with colleagues. I'll also share the contact details for Tim, Praveen and Kieran in case you've got any further questions or any question that you didn't get a chance to ask today. Feel free to just contact them directly. But with that, I'll just thank you again and wish you a good rest of the day. Thanks ever so much. Bye.
Thank you, guys.
Bye.
Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.